On May 22nd, 2022, Pastor Michael Jennings of the Vision of Abundant Life Church in Sylacauga, Alabama, was watering his out-of-town neighbor's flowers in Childersburg, Alabama, when Officer Chris Smith, Officer Jay Gable, and Sergeant Jeremy Brooks of the Childersburg Police Department responded to a 911 call made by another neighbor, Amber Roberson, who reported that a, quote, younger black male and a gold SUV that she did not recognize were at the house while the owners were away. Officer Smith parked his vehicle and approached Pastor Jennings before either of the other officers arrived.
Howdy.
Hey man, how's it going?
Pretty good. What you doing here, man?
Water flower.
All right, they saying that, is that your vehicle?
Nah,
It's not?
that's the neighbor's vehicle.
The neighbors? You live here?
Nah, I don't live here.
Okay. They saying that this vehicle is not supposed to be here and you're not supposed to be
Who's
here.
saying that?
They called about it. I don't know who called.
I'm supposed to be here. I'm Pastor Jennings. I live across the street.
You're Pastor Jennings?
Yes, I'm looking out for their house while they gone.
Okay.
Watering their flowers.
Okay. Well, that's cool. Now, do you have like ID and
Oh
all?
no, man. I'm not gonna give you no ID.
Why not?
I ain't did nothing wrong. And they did
Well,
nothing
you look,
suspicious.
listen. I'm not saying do nothing wrong.
Doc, listen,
There's a
I
suspicious
was
person.
Look, I used to be a police officer in Goodwater. Don't come here with that. Okay?
Look, man, don't do this to me. There's a suspicious person
Don't come here with that. Take your butt home.
in the yard, and if you're not one to identify yourself,
I don't have to identify myself. It's not a stop and identify state. I live right over there across the street. Who called?
That was my first question. Was it a stop and identify state? Even though I don't think that would work if you're on private property anyway, but okay.
You live black man
He
out
don't
here
live here.
warning his neighbor flowers. You think
I'm not saying
doing
nothing
something
about.
illegal. You have no right to approach me if I ain't did nothing suspicious or nothing wrong. Told him I'm a pastor. I pastor, and I don't want to hear you.
Sir,
You want to lock me up? Lock me up.
nobody wants to lock
Lock
you
me.
up.
I'm not showing y'all anything. I'm gonna continue to water these
We have a
flowers.
call.
I don't care who called y'all. Lock me up and see what happens. I want you to.
Hey, man, just come here and talk to us.
I'm
What?
gonna
What?
water these back flowers. Is what I'm finna do.
No, you're going to catch an obstruction charge if you keep walking away.
You can do whatever you want. Do it. Do it.
We're just trying to talk to you, man. Come here. Come here, boy. We got one that's not listening to us. Look, man, let me see your phone. Let me see your phone, dude. Just calm down, okay?
No.
Stop.
I like this.
Okay. We're just trying.
When a pastor tells you he likes this and you putting handcuffs on him, no, you gonna already messed up. The man said he's an ex-police officer in another county, so he knows the law, right? Presumably so. Apparently, these officers don't know the law, so I can't assume that. But you should be on your P's and Q's and everything when the officer when someone tells you that, because you should be questioning, am I messing up right now?
Trying to talk to you and
Sir,
see.
I don't want to argue with you, okay?
All right, go ahead and do what
I
you gotta
don't
do,
want to
Doc.
arrest you either.
Do what you got to do. Go on and
Okay.
lock me up.
Look, just have a
It's
seat.
You're
already
not
a
locked
lawsuit.
up, you're
It's
just-
already a lawsuit,
Yes,
Doc.
sir. Yes, sir.
It's already
Okay.
a lawsuit.
Just have a seat, okay?
Sit down, man. Just
Okay, let me call my wife.
you're not calling
My
nobody.
son just got racially profiled in Michigan. He's got his master's degree. He's an athletic director. 3 police profiler came in. I was ex-police officer in Goodwater. I told you I'm a pastor.
Okay, look, man.
Who called y'all?
We.
That's what I'm
I
trying
don't
to
have to
tell
ID
You
myself.
will not
If
listen.
I have a call on you, you have to identify yourself to me.
No, I
You
don't.
understand what
No,
I'm
I
telling
don't.
you?
No, I don't.
Officer Gable screams at Pastor Jennings, claiming that he must identify himself to the officers because they received a call on him. In fact,
Let's get the truth about whether this state, whatever state they're in, is stop and identify. All right? We're about to get some truth.
throughout the encounter, the officers repeatedly claimed they have a right to identify any person involved in a 911 call. However, as we have discussed many times on ATA, officers cannot arrest an individual for refusing to identify themselves unless they have the reasonable suspicion necessary to detain them. And the state has enacted a stop and identify law that requires the individual to identify themselves under the circumstances. Under Section 15-5-30 of the Alabama Code, a police officer, quote, may stop any person abroad in a public place whom he reasonably suspects is committing, has committed, or is about to commit a felony or other public offense, and may demand of him his name, address, and an explanation of his.
What's the offense? Watering some plants? Come on. To go from protecting and serving to detaining somebody for watering some plants. You know, I guarantee when kids grew up and they say they want to be police officers, they didn't think they'd be arresting people for watering plants. Guaranteed. And that man's yelling at a pastor. I guarantee you that pastor, he got more lung capacity than him. I guarantee you that much.
Actions. While Pastor Jennings was on private property when the officers approached him and demanded his identification,
Same thing I said.
That does not necessarily mean that he was not in a public place for the purposes of this statute. In the
Explain.
1983 case of Schultz versus State, the Court of Criminal Appeals of Alabama held that a vehicle was in a public place within the meaning of Section 15-5-30 when it was in an open cotton field on private property 300 or 400 yards from the highway because, quote, its headlights and its movement were clearly visible from the public roadway from which it was cited by the deputies. Applying this logic, a court would likely conclude that Pastor Jennings was in a public.
That's a load of crap. Again, if by that saying, I guess your front lawn is public property. So you guess you don't have any right to property anymore or privacy. That's ridiculous.
Place for the purposes of the Alabama Stop and Identify statute, as he was much closer to the public street, and his actions would have been clearly visible to anyone using that roadway. However, the officers still would not be permitted to detain and identify Pastor Jennings under this statute unless they had reasonable suspicion that he was committing, had committed, or was about to commit a felony or public offense. We will discuss whether the officers had reasonable suspicion later in this episode, but for now, it's important to note that even if the officers had the required level of suspicion to detain and identify Pastor Jennings, the statute would only authorize them to demand his name, his address, and an explanation of his actions. Pastor Jennings provided this information within the first few seconds of his encounter with Officer Smith. Although he did not provide his first name and merely stated that he lived across the street instead of listing his exact address, the officers did not ask him to provide this information. Instead, they repeatedly demanded that he provide identification, despite the fact that the statute clearly does not authorize them to do so.
I think it's going to be...
Please call my wife right quick.
We're going to wait off. All right. Well, y'all sit with him, Jeremy. I'm going to go over here and see if it's this people over here that call. Hey, you know what? You know what? 10:15. 10:15. 10:15. I ain't going to sit there and have that, dude.
Will you let my wife...
No, you ain't letting nothing now.
I'm on this
I mean, I don't know if they called. I mean, I saw the gold SUV.
I don't know what took place there because there's a camera cut, but why does it sound like a grown man just got mad at his kids and said he's not playing these games anymore? What is it? Why is that the feeling that I just got? No, it's your job. You can't just get fed up and decide instead of doing your job, you're going to just arrest somebody or take them to jail or whatever. At the end of the day, you're supposed to do your job. And it sounded like he just gave up. I could be wrong because there was a cut there and I don't know what the cut was about. But if he just gave up on doing his job, man, you sad. Do better. Like, people can't just decide to shorthand when it comes to people's life. Come on, man.
So, and I saw him outside, and all I did said, "Hey, man, do you live here?" "No." "Is that your car?" "No, it's the neighbor's." "Do you know that gentleman back?"
Yeah.
"You do?"
Yeah.
Does he have
He lives right there.
Okay, does he have permission here to be watering flowers?
He may because they are friends.
Okay.
And they went out of town today, so
Right.
he may be watering their flowers.
Okay.
It'd be completely normal.
Okay,
And
is
that's
that
fine.
that's fine. If he would have said, "Hey, I got this," gave his identification because he's a suspicious person, he said that's not his vehicle, it's their vehicle.
We
Okay.
have a call. Like,
Yeah.
we're here
Okay.
because we're called here. I don't know who called, but somebody did.
Yeah, he lives right there, and he would be watering their flowers. This is probably my fault.
Okay, do you know who Roy Malum is? That's the person that owns that vehicle, Roy
Ask
Malum.
him who owns the house. I don't know the guy's name.
Listen, let me talk to you. Who is Roy Malum? That's you, ain't it?
I'm Michael Jennings, sir.
You're Michael Jennings. Who is Roy Malum? Okay, that's who that vehicle belongs to.
Yeah, that's
Who
all I
lives
know.
here?
His name is Roy.
That's who lives here?
That's Roy. I call him Roy and I call his wife Connie, and I've been dealing with him for 7 years that I've been
Yeah.
living here.
They are friends.
Yeah,
I'm
I
sorry
got to
about
keep
that.
their flowers watered.
Listen to me, man. Listen to
We
me.
are
Anytime the
actually
police come out and they say,
bring it, Sally.
"We want to identify you," you have to identify yourself because there's a reasonable suspicion, there's a reasonable man, there's a
That has to
vehicle.
commit a crime.
There's a reasonable suspicion that you're here. There's not a crime.
Yeah.
If you would have said, "Yeah, here's my name, here's everything," we're
How is watering plants reasonable suspicion? Of what? You can't just say someone is suspicious. You have to say they're suspicious because they may have committed a crime. Just saying someone is suspicious is not enough. Reasonable, articulable suspicion. I think that's how it goes, right? What can you reasonably articulate is the crime that this man is committing? Please.
Right,
I
okay.
told him my name.
You didn't tell me your name.
I decided, he asked me who I was. I said,
You didn't give it to me when I first
Pastor
asked.
Jennings. Pastor Jennings.
That's not a name.
But
That's
still,
a pastor.
Yeah.
I need
God,
your
The way
name.
y'all handled this situation was totally wrong.
Officer Smith once again claimed
I
that
concur.
Pastor Jennings was required to identify himself because they had reasonable suspicion, but does not identify what crime they suspected him of committing. As the Supreme Court explained in the 1989 case of United States versus Socolow, quote, "The concept of reasonable suspicion is not readily, or even usefully, reduced to a neat set of legal rules. In evaluating the validity of a stop such as this, we must consider the totality of the circumstances." The court also clarified that 911 calls are not, quote, per se reliable, and that, quote, "even a reliable tip will justify an investigative stop only if it creates reasonable suspicion that criminal activity may be afoot. Depending on the situation, a 911 call reporting the presence of an unknown person from a neighbor, even an anonymous one, could create reasonable suspicion of various criminal activities under certain circumstances. However, when Officer Smith approached Pastor Jennings, his personal observations of a man watering flowers, combined with Pastor Jennings's clear explanation of what he was doing, should have dissipated any reasonable suspicion that may have existed based on the 911 call. Although reasonable suspicion does not need to rule out entirely the possibility of innocent conduct, a court would likely find that the officers did not have the reasonable suspicion that would be necessary to constitutionally detain Pastor Jennings, as the innocent nature of his conduct was more than evident.
Well, listen.
You racial profile.
We're not racial profile.
Yes, you did.
No, sir. No, sir. We're not about
I
that.
told
okay?
you I was here watering the flowers. But it's
How do I know that's the truth?
Because
Anybody?
I had the water hose in my hand. I was
Anybody-
watering up.
How you know it's a duck? It walks like a duck, it quacks like a duck. How you know he's watering plants? You saw him literally doing that. Look at that smile on his face. Look at the smile on this man's face. Like you've lost a couple of screws, man. Come on now.
Look, let's sit back in here.
Okay.
What is your social?
I'm not gonna give you my social.
You need to give me your social.
I'll give you my
Pastor.
name. That's all I'm gonna give you. You're not gonna run no 27 and 28 on me and get me in the system for no reason.
What are we gonna do with him?
He knows his
He's in
stuff.
charge of, I guess, disorderly conduct, the failure to obey a police officer. He refused to give any information.
I got. He said he's not gonna give me his social, but he gave me his name and date of birth.
Okay, and she's saying the same thing. She won't give her name because he got arrested.
I mean, this could have been all avoided if he would have just.
Well, I told her that. And every time I try to tell him, he just says, "You good, man? I appreciate this. I appreciate it." You know, because all he does is racial profiling. He's suing. That's all he would say. You couldn't talk to him.
Well, wasn't going to detain him until he walked away, started coming to the front yard saying he's coming to water these plants. And then he gets his phone out and he just keeps speeding walking away. And I said, okay, fine, come here.
What's the charge? So just obstruction?
Disorderly or obstruction.
I'll just.
I'm thinking they're probably gonna let him go after understanding that they're the ones that screwed up here. But I think they need a reason to justify what already took place. So they're going to. Oh man.
Just do obstruction.
Obstruction of governmental operations.
You know, we got to have some.
Yeah.
After already placing Pastor Jennings under arrest, the officers discuss what crime they intend to charge him with, briefly considering a disorderly conduct charge before settling on obstruction of governmental operations. Under Section 13A-11-7 of the Alabama Code, an individual commits the crime of disorderly conduct if, with, quote, intent to cause public inconvenience, annoyance, or alarm, or recklessly creating a risk thereof, they engage in fighting or in violent, tumultuous, or threatening behavior, make unreasonable noise, use abusive or obscene language, or make an obscene gesture in a public place, disturb any lawful assembly or meeting of persons without lawful authority, obstruct vehicular or pedestrian traffic or a transportation facility, or congregate with others in a public place and refuse to comply with a lawful order of law enforcement to disperse. Clearly, none of Pastor Jennings' actions during this encounter came
Get you some money.
remotely close to violating this statute. This means that if a court reviewing this situation concluded that the officers did not have reasonable suspicion to detain Pastor Jennings for watering his neighbor's flowers, then Pastor Jennings could not be convicted of obstruction for refusing to identify himself. Of course, as we discussed earlier, Pastor Jennings did not refuse to identify himself. He refused to provide identification. Because the obstruction statute requires that the obstruction be committed by means of intimidation, physical force, or interference, or by any other independently unlawful act, and it was not unlawful for Pastor Jennings to refuse to provide his identification in this situation, a court would likely determine that he could not be convicted of obstruction for his actions even if the officers had reasonable suspicion.
in the bond book. If it's not listed, just do the lowest one, the 500. That way we won't be overcharging or anything like that.
He seems like a reasonable, nice guy. I don't understand. I'll tell you what'll happen if you like, man. Real quick.
Okay.
That's my
Okay.
dog.
So
Yeah.
you good?
Hold on, his wife is coming, so you can do this once.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so he's been
I'll
identified. He's
tell you what
identified
happened.
himself.
We
She's
get a call
identified
here.
him and verified
Her.
who he is and where
Because
he lives.
we say, hey,
Your phone is
sir,
at the
we have a
house.
call here.
What do you want us to
Need
do?
you to identify yourself, please. Like, no, I'm not identifying myself. You don't have to identify me. He's just, we wouldn't listen. He's walking away, so of
Okay,
course
so
we
what do you
detain
want
him.
us to do?
We don't know what's going on.
Gotcha.
If she does tell us it's a mistake and all that stuff, at this point, he's already collected the charge. Once we place him on arrest, we can't un-arrest.
Yes, you can, because as a law enforcement officer, you choose what laws you enforce. Come on now. It's not just it's by the book. We all know this. If it was your buddy who got caught up in the situation and one of them roll up and say, hey, man, oh, I know him. Done. Done. It's that simple. It's literally that simple. And at the end of the day, just because someone breaks a law, I don't know what to quote to get the exact information to follow this, but it's not every single law that is broken in front of a law enforcement officer that needs to be met with repercussions. That's not true. That's literally just not true.
Does that make sense? All we told him was like, if you're here to water the plants, that's okay. Just please identify yourself, just your name, and let us call the owner. And he didn't want to do that until he caught the charge. He's going to go to the Childersburg Police Department. We're going to process an arrest report. It's going to be one charge for obstruction of our investigation. He'll go to the jail. He can bond out immediately. You can get your bondsman. It'll be 10% of the bond.
So it'd be like $50.
We're not investigating a crime. We're investigating a call. And we have a right to identify anybody involved in that call. Walking away and yelling at us and telling us we have no right, and we have a call there. But if he wants to fight it in court, that's fine.
Is it okay if I talk to him?
Yes, ma'am. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Is it okay?
Yes, ma'am. That's fine.
We need to clear up.
Huh?
Clear up.
Need to clear up?
Yeah.
Immediately after this incident, Pastor Jennings was taken to jail and charged with obstructing governmental operations. However, a few days later, on June 2nd, 2022, Childersburg Police Chief Richard B. McClelland issued a statement announcing that he had requested that the charge be dropped. In his statement, Chief McClelland indicated that he reviewed the 911 call and body camera footage and interviewed Officer Smith, Officer Gable, and Sergeant Brooks, and that, as a result of his investigation, he recommended to the municipal judge of the city of Childersburg, quote, that the warrant be dismissed with prejudice, and the judge has dismissed the aforementioned charge against Michael Jennings. It should be noted that Chief McClelland resigned
It's almost as if
from
he
his
can
position
unarrest
on
somebody,
August
right?
11th, 2022, a few months after his involvement in a single vehicle traffic accident where, according to the crash report, quote, there was a strong odor of an alcoholic beverage inside the vehicle. An investigation into the crash is ongoing and has been turned over to the Office of Alabama Attorney General Steve Marshall. Pastor Jennings is represented by an attorney and plans to file a federal lawsuit in the Northern District of Alabama. As of the date of writing this episode, no lawsuit has been filed.
He said he would. Hey, he said he would. What more can he say? He's a man of his word. He told you I'm gonna sue you. He said he liked this. You should have known it was coming. I'd concur. Like I said, they weren't the usual belligerent, aggressive tyrants that we normally come across on this channel. But at the end of the day, it's as if they were, it's like they were trying to say, well, we're too far deep in it to turn back now. No, it's never too wrong to do the right thing. It's never too late to do the right thing. Come on now. You can't unarrest somebody, especially when you shouldn't have arrested them in the first place. It's like, I don't know. With that kind of logic, I guess all these officers that screw up, the reason why they don't try to make it better is because you can't make anything better. Once you go down the road, there's no U-turns. Just keep on moving. That's a load of crap, and we both know that, right? We all know that. Guys, thank you for kicking in with me in another video. I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope our pastor gets a payout, all right? I'll see you in the next one. Peace.